What's going on, everybody? We have a lot to talk about in this video. First off, beside me, another potential Bitcoin ETF seeking approval. We're also going to talk a little bit about potential rate cuts. We do have some upcoming inflation reads, PPI and CPI. We're going to look over those, where they've been, kind of their trajectory and such. And then we have some other news to look over too. Let's start here. Trump's Truth Social Bitcoin ETF seeks SEC approval. Paperwork was filed with the SEC on Tuesday seeking a rule change to list this proposed fund. Now, this article doesn't really mention much more about it, but it does mention his recent partnership or cooperation with Crypto.com and Yorkville America Digital to launch crypto and energy ETFs. And Trump Media says it plans to invest up to $250 million of its own money into the products. Now, a week ago, Trump Media announced they had finished raising their $2.4 billion. This is going to be used to launch a Bitcoin treasury. Speaking of Bitcoin treasuries, 61 publicly listed companies now hold over 3% of total Bitcoin supply. Now, here's something interesting. These companies have actually outpaced MicroStrategy recently. I mean, I guess that makes sense because we're talking about 60 companies versus one company, but that one company is pretty much consistently the largest buyer of Bitcoin. And if you compare them one to one, they are still definitely the largest. But it's sort of interesting that combined, these other companies are buying more than MicroStrategy. The amount of Bitcoin held by these 60 companies has doubled in the past 2 months, from below 50,000 to about 100,000 Bitcoin. And here's the list of companies. Sorry, this is very small. I guess I can zoom it. Here you go. That's better. Of course, individually, these companies don't hold a candle to MicroStrategy. They have minuscule amounts of Bitcoin comparatively, but many of them are just getting started. Where will these other companies be in 5-10 years from now? How much Bitcoin will they hold? And it's almost every day that we're hearing about a new company starting a Bitcoin treasury. Just the other day, we had news of SolarBank officially announcing a Bitcoin treasury strategy on June 3. And then on the same day, Paris-based crypto firm Blockchain Group announced a $68 million Bitcoin acquisition. Late May, Norwegian crypto brokerage firm K33 raised $6.2 million to buy Bitcoin. And in the last 30 days, 19 entities have jumped on the Bitcoin bandwagon. Not taking risks is a risk itself, and that is a great quote from CZ. These companies are taking risks. Every company takes risks. Risks are not binary like 0 or 1. Risks are a range of 0 to 100. With the right balance, you can achieve the best risk to return of investment ratio that works for you. Risks must and can be managed. Not taking risks is a risk in itself. These companies are taking a risk. Let's be honest. Let's be real. Bitcoin is not guaranteed to just always go up. Considering we're getting towards late 2025, if you follow the cycle, we have maybe a few months left of bullish momentum. Cycle-wise, a lot of these companies could be starting Bitcoin treasuries right at the tail end, right before we start getting into a bear market if the 4-year cycle plays out. So there is definitely a risk to it. If you zoom out multiple years, I think the risk is extremely low. But if you're expecting a return of investment a year from now, what if Bitcoin is lower in price? Standard Chartered identifies a pain level of 22% below the average purchase price as a potential liquidation level. Half of these have average purchase prices above $90,000 Bitcoin. Price volatility may increase risks. I do think these companies are taking the right risk. I do think we are going to continue to see this with Bitcoin, continuing to see this adoption, continuing to see more and more Bitcoin taken off the supply to basically never return. And now these 61 Bitcoin corporate treasuries hold a combined 3.2% of all Bitcoin that will ever exist. This doesn't include the spot ETFs. This doesn't include governments, private companies, etc. Speaking of private companies and individuals have overall decreased their amount of Bitcoin. The year-to-date change in Bitcoin holdings, they have all come down. This is new supply. New supply adds to the amount of Bitcoin. Individuals are basically non-existent. They have overall lost Bitcoin year over year. And this Bitcoin, where is it going? It's going to the smart money. It's going to the public companies, funds, and ETPs. I'm sorry this is moving all over the place. It's driving me crazy, but bear with me. If we start seeing these individuals suddenly accumulating more Bitcoin, maybe that's a sign that it's time to start being cautious, a time to start trimming. Individuals always tend to be the ones late to the party. They tend to sell at the bottom and they tend to buy at the top. Now, I did want to mention that today, the day of this upload, we are now at new lows in terms of Bitcoin supply on exchanges. We are now at 2.11 million. This is a new low. We hit a 2.14, 15, kind of spiked, got back down there, spiked again, and now we are at new lows. More and more Bitcoin is going to be locked away. And this is where things are going. Less and less Bitcoin on exchanges. Bitcoin is scarce. It is a scarce asset, and that's the whole point. That's one thing that makes it so valuable. You can't dilute it like the Bitcoin miners. You can't create more. You can't uncover more like gold. You can't just print up a bunch of Bitcoin like USD or other currency. Bitcoin is a one of its kind. And public companies, the big smart money, they are finally catching on. While retail overall sells off their holdings. Very disappointing. Now, I also want to mention that we do have PPI and CPI coming up, I believe, next week, a little over a week from now. And we did get PCE. This is the Fed's preferred gauge of inflation, and it did come in at 2.1. The forecast was 2.2. This is a new low that we haven't seen since September's read, where it hit at 2.1 and then started coming back up. PCE has been going in the right direction, and that is fantastic in hopes of rate cuts. Looking at the FedWatch tool, I believe PCE has kind of impacted it. Recently, somewhat recently, before PCE, this was like a 25% chance. Now it's getting up to like a 1 in 3 chance, getting one rate cut by July. This is the following meeting after June. It is very unlikely to get a cut in June. Maybe CPI and PPI prove me otherwise, but I'm very doubtful. However, PPI, CPI could increase the odds of a cut in July, although it's still pretty unlikely. Moving to September, we're like a coin flip of a chance to get a cut. And end of year, we're kind of bouncing between the chance of 3 rate cuts and 2 rate cuts. We are entering a cutting cycle again from the Fed. It is coming. It's just a matter of time. It's a matter of being patient, watching for PCE, CPI, PPI. What's unemployment looking like? If unemployment starts ticking up, combined with inflation coming down, that lays the runway for rate cuts. And PPI is coming out on June 12th. The previous read was a 2.4. You can see it was really trending up, but recently we have been trending down over the last 3-4 months or so. If we see PPI come in under 2.4%, that'll be a fantastic sign in my opinion. And then CPI, our last read was 2.3 here. If we can see it come down from the previous read, that'll be fantastic. The trend has been down. We have been in a downtrend over the last couple of months. I do personally think we're getting closer and closer to rate cuts, but at the same time, there are some overhangs. There are some hangups. What if the tariffs actually finally come into play instead of keep getting pushed out, keep getting extensions and what have you? And that is one thing that the Fed cites is, the uncertainty of tariffs and how that can affect inflation. How that can affect inflation. So there are many moving parts, but the positive thing is we are seeing PCE, CPI, PPI all trending down towards the Fed's 2% target. We are getting closer and closer. Bitcoin is the answer to inflation. While CPI, PPI, and PCE are all trending down, over time, they're still at 2%. They will never be at 0%. We are always going to have inflation. That is how dollars work. That is how currency works. They need to print money, and this will never change. As the decades go by, money will continue to be printed. This money will go into hard assets, real estate, Bitcoin, gold, stocks, art, especially assets that are limited in supply, especially assets that are non-dilutive, aka Bitcoin. Now, I did want to mention Bitcoin's head and shoulder. We talked about this yesterday. I would love to see a break over this descending trend, this yellow line here. If we can break this, this would somewhat invalidate this head and shoulder if we can just start popping up. If not, we might be looking at this head and shoulder. We could be heading towards 98,000. If we can't hold 102, I think 98,000 is very likely. Does it matter what Bitcoin does on the short term? No. It does matter, but in reality, if you focus on the long term, if you continue to DCA, accumulate, buy during the bad times, buy during the good times, buy all the time, DCA, buy a little heavier when there's bad sentiment, buy a little lighter when everyone's bullish. These public traded companies, the BlackRocks, the big boys, they're all looking at Bitcoin long term. They're all accumulating as much Bitcoin as they can. They are never going to let it go. Maybe they'll sell little portions here and there, of course, to make some extra money. But long term, they know that Bitcoin is just going to keep going up, and you will get more multiples the longer you hold. Bitcoin supply is going to keep dwindling down and dwindling down. And as the halvings come along, less and less Bitcoin will be produced daily. Less and less Bitcoin will come to the market day by day. Soon, the only ones having access to Bitcoin will be the Bitcoin miners. it is going to get harder and harder to be able to even acquire Bitcoin. But what say you? Is Bitcoin the most valuable asset in the world, or am I crazy? How do you feel about inflation? Are we going to see a good PPI and CPI? Are we going to see more likelihood of cuts coming up? Or are tariffs or possibly something else going to throw it off? Going to contribute to inflation coming back up and the Fed not being able to cut? Always appreciate your comments. Leave them all down below. I appreciate you guys as always, and I'll see you tomorrow.